So basically, aquaponics is one of the fastest growing area of food production around the globe, and for obvious reasons. It's basically, as was just mentioned, the combination of aquaculture and hydroponics, right? So basically, aquaculture, well, we're doing the course tropical aquaculture, right? So just to summarize, is the just to give a brief definition, is the cultivation of aquatic species in a controlled environment. So whether it's fish, crayfish, shellfish, etc., etc. So over the last couple of weeks, we would have gone into different topics in aquaculture, and we would have seen the valuable role that aquaculture has towards food security, for diversification, produce, right, as well as opportunity as an entrepreneur to get started, like especially different species of aquaculture organisms that we would have covered. You could see market potential and different things like that. So aquaculture in itself, as again, is the fastest growing area of animal food production in the entire world. Yeah. So outright aquaculture is already um, taken itself, is growing leaps and bounds all over the world, right? And then hydroponics is the cultivation of plants without soil, and that itself is being highly sought after because of the fact that the soilless gardening is a climate smart technique in agriculture. You could employ digital agriculture. um, so basically you could utilize things like sensors, automation, apps on your phone to monitor nutrients, your system, so you can optimize it for plant production and all of these things. So all of these things, hydroponics, is a system that it can readily utilized for this technological type of agriculture. Yeah, and in addition to that, you don't need arable land for it neither, right? And one of the biggest challenges we have right now is that we kind of losing a lot of arable land, and not just here locally, but is something that we face with all over the world. Yeah. So basically, hydroponics itself is also a very highly sorted out area or field of agriculture. And what aquaponics is combining, right, aquaculture, which is already the fastest growing area of food production, is sustainable, etc., together with hydroponics. Yeah. So basically, it's a system where you're getting the best of both technologies. Yeah. And because of that, right, is really I usually regard it as food production, the food production system of the future. And after this presentation, we'd have a better understanding, why it is, I would think so, or I would suggest so, right? So if we look at this photo here, all of these organisms are what was done in aquaculture, hydroponics, and aquaponic systems, and they are all systems that I did, right? As well as for clients of mine. And as you can see, just by looking at the first slide, you're seeing fish, crayfish, tank systems, hydroponic systems, um, all different organisms. And this is the thing about aquaponics. Aquaponics is not just growing one type of crop, and you're not just growing either vegetables or animals, or in this case aquatic species for aquaculture. You're growing basically everything together. So it's like the ultimate polyculture system that you could have. Yeah. And all of these are grown in a controlled environment where you don't need arable land or soil. Yeah. And you would see the importance of this while we go along. So basically, if we ask ourselves, why aquaponics? All right. So two major global and regional challenges we faced with right now, right? The first is world population increase. Yeah. So it's estimated by 2050, right? We're going to have an estimated 9.1 billion people in the world, right? Which is about 2 billion people more than we currently have. And as it is, we currently already exhausting all the arable land and thing that we have, as well as the natural resources that we have as well. So to bump up food production to feed an additional 2 billion people, that's going to put heavy constraints, that are going to put a lot of pressure on already existing agricultural systems. And the thing about it is, even if we try to maximize and increase the amount of arable land that we could have to feed these additional 2 billion people, it's estimated that the available arable land will only increase by 4%. Yeah. And when we couple this with things like global climate change, right, where we're changing weather patterns, right? Because of changing weather patterns, we have shifts in how the proliferation of pests and disease and all of these things would significantly negatively impact agriculture, right? We really are going to be faced with a global food crisis in the near future. And conventional agriculture is not going to cut it. Yeah, it's not going to cut it. Look at what's going on right now. Literally, for the past couple of days, South was under extreme rain, right? And areas that will not flood at this time of year flooded. And the thing about it is, those areas, farmers plant seasonally, which means they plant during the crop time and they make a bumper harvest during the crop time. So they primarily plant like watermelon, right? That's on Penal side, south side, right? So that's closer by me. And basically they use that bumper harvest, they sell it, and that will kind of rally them out through the rest of the year until they come back again to the dry season when the conditions are right to plant these areas down there. And what happened is those areas now are underwater. So those farmers now, because they're getting extreme rain during times when it's supposed to be extreme sun, right? They lost their entire crop, their entire production. And it's very difficult. It's probably near impossible now to catch back up for the season again. Because if they are to replant when the water subside, once the rainy season starts, the area is naturally flooded again. So that means they probably ultimately lose a year, quote unquote, a year production. So they lose out on income earning ability for almost the entire year now, because it could almost call this whole period gone, and then they can't do anything during the rainy season. And this is the reality right here in Trinidad. And the thing about it, people do realize that global climate change is affecting us, while everybody's still thinking that, it's all about an increase in temperature and the place will get hotter by 2 degrees, and it mightn't be that much or whatever the case is. Apart from the increase in temperature, it also one of the effects of global climate change is shifts in weather patterns, and we've seen it all the time. When we're supposed to get rain, we get sun. When we're supposed to get sun, we get rain. When the rain falling, it fall into extremes. When the sun come out, it coming out to extremes. All of these things are shifts in weather patterns. So global climate change is affecting us, right? And it's only predicted to get worse in the near future. And not just here in Trinidad, but all over the globe as well too. And I don't know if you all recall, we have in excess of $6 billion, the Caribbean region, 6 billion US dollars in imported food annually, right? So when things get messed up all over the world, it's going to hit home as well, and it's hitting home directly right now too. So again, right, why aquaponics, right? So aquaponics again does not rely on the prevailing weather conditions. I mean, if rainfall, we only have 2 seasons, wet and dry. If rainfall, if sunshine, it's still not really going to affect the aquaponics production to any extreme extents, because we're not farming in soil. We're not dependent on rainfall for watering with crops. We're not dependent on, if rainfall too much, the area will be inundated and the plants cannot tolerate that type of environment. We basically, again, farming out of soil and controlled environments. Everything is automated through the use of pumps, air pumps, and all these different sort of things like that. And because of that now, we can basically mitigate the effects of these unpredictable weather patterns, the need for arable land, and all the constraints we would typically have with conventional agriculture, we could put that out the window. In addition to that, with aquaponics, it is way more conservative in terms of water and nutrients, right? As well as more productive, right? So you could grow way more crops per unit area, right, than you could with traditional agriculture or conventional agriculture. And in so doing now, you could maximize on your available space. In addition to that, one of the limiting factors to expanding conventional agriculture is the need for arable land. Having land is not good enough. If the land is not if the soil type is not suited for crop production, it's very difficult to grow anything there. The thing about it is with aquaponics, we could use you're not limited to just using arable land. You could use any available land. You could use the space around your house. You could use a decking on your roof, right? You name it. In fact, aquaponics is being utilized in a lot of rooftop gardening systems all over the globe right now. Yeah, and it's picking up here. We recently did a on the roof aquaponics club right there in Shogunas on the Price Club supermarket. So they actually own that big supermarket by the mall, upstairs the mall there. There's an aquaponics model there too, right? Because the owner they realized the importance of utilizing available space for food production, and he's going to grow fresh vegetables to put back in his grocery. So again, aquaponics is really a good viable option that you all could look into as well too, right? Even if it is to grow your own produce at home, right? Because it's grown in a very sustainable fashion, as well as the produce is grown in a organic manner. While you cannot strictly call it organic, right? It is grown in an organic manner. You're not using synthetic fertilizers or anything like that. Yeah. So again, this graph just depicting what the global situation, global regional situation is like for a decline in arable land. And we would see from the graph, developed countries, we already have a decline, meaning we're losing arable land. Yeah, in developing countries, it's going to be as a reality as well too in the near future, as we can see from the graph as well, right? So eventually it is anticipated that this will also go on the decline as well, and when that happens, it's a lot of problems. So again, aquaponics is the combination of aquaculture and hydroponics, the best of both technologies. Yeah. So when we say the best of both technologies, with aquaculture, remember when we did recirculating aquaculture systems and we did the nitrogen cycle, right, or the nitrification process, you would have seen where ammonia, which is produced as a waste product from fish, is converted to nitrites and then it's converted to nitrates. Yeah. So basically, the ammonia and the nitrites are harmful to the fish. The nitrates only harmful in excessively high quantities. So it's really the preferred form of ammonia that you want to have in your system. But ammonia is, I'm sorry, nitrates is basically um, is like a plant fertilizer. And if this water with this nitrates is released into the environment, it could cause catastrophic effects, right? And cause things such as eutrophication, where we get algal blooms in waterways and streams and drains and all these things. And when the algae blooms, because again, nitrates to feed on, right? Nitrates and phosphates and different things. And it feeds on this, it blooms, and then it eventually dies off. And when it dies off, that process strips the system of oxygen and all the aquatic organisms die, all the fish, all the everything. So aquaculture, recirculating type aquaculture systems, the biggest challenge is a sustainable way to get rid of this high nutrient rich wastewater. Yeah. With hydroponics, right, we supply the plants with all the nutrients it needs. Yeah. And this basically comes at a cost because we have to buy this fertilizer. So here we have an aquaculture, sorry. We have nutrient rich wastewater, right, being generated. And the challenge is to get rid of it. In hydroponics, we need to create a nutrient-rich water to feed our plants. So aquaponics, right, what research has found is like, hey, if we combine the aquaculture component with the hydroponic component or the hydroponic system, what we can have happening is a kind of synergistic, symbiotic relationship existing, where the wastewater from the aquaculture section could flow through the hydroponic section with the plants. The plants now will come in contact with our water and they will feed over all the nitrates and the phosphates and all the different things, right? All the different nutrients that is dissolved within that water and utilize it for their growth and development. And by doing that, what they will do, they will pull it out of this the water and they will basically purify it. So clean water will now flow back to your fish. right? And this is the basis of aquaponics. So with aquaponics, they're utilizing the nutrient-rich wastewater from the aquaculture section, using it to grow your plants in the hydroponics section. When the plants utilize it, they clean the water, and clean water flows back to the fish, and it's a continuous cycle, right? So you're extending the use of your water. You no longer have to worry about releasing this nutrient-rich wastewater into the environment. And in addition to that, you're getting plant fertilizers for free. So you don't have to go and buy fertilizer. And on top of that, you're getting it from a naturally sourced kind of system, right? So basically, it could kind of deem more the organic side of things, and it can fetch a higher price for your produce as well. Yeah. So aquaponics is really the best of both technologies. So aquaponics really involves the cultivation of three organisms, right? The first organism is your fish. Your second organism is your, not your plants, but your bacteria. Remember, when we did the biofiltration, you all saw the importance of the bacteria in converting ammonia to nitrites and then to nitrates, right? We saw that, we saw how important the biofilter is in a recirculating aquaculture setup. It is no different in aquaponics. If you do have that biofilter, or you do have that beneficial bacteria converting the ammonia, in addition to not converting the ammonia and removing it from the water so that the fish could be on a basically, where the fish could basically be growing in an environment that is free of this harmful substance, right? If you do have that being converted, then your plants in your aquaponic system will on the other end not have food, plant food, because nitrates is the preferred form of ammonia that plants utilize for growth and development. Yeah. So just so you wouldn't be lost, fish produce ammonia, which is harmful to them. The ammonia is converted to nitrites by a beneficial bacteria. Nitrites is also harmful to fish. So you need to get rid of ammonia, you need to get rid of you need to get rid of nitrites. The beneficial bacteria also converts the nitrites to nitrates. Plants utilize the nitrates more readily than both ammonia and nitrites. They only use small quantities of those. So nitrates is the preferred form that plants utilize for growth and development. Yeah. So with aquaponics, we really need that bacteria, because if we do have the bacteria, we wouldn't get the ammonia being converted, and the ammonia will build up and it can kill your fish. And in addition to that, the ammonia, by not being converted, will not be converted to nitrates, and then you have no nutrients for your plants. So your plants will suffer, your fish will suffer, and could possibly die, as well as your plants. Yeah. So this is how important the bacteria is in an aquaponic system. So it does not just keep the water quality parameters suitable for one organism, which is the fish. It also keeps the water quality at an optimum for the plants as well, because it helps to generate or to create the nutrients or the nitrates for the plants. So aquaponics is the management of a complete ecosystem, plants, fish, and the bacteria. So aquaponics is not new, right? It didn't just start up. It's actually an ancient practice, right? So it was first started and grown by the and utilized by the Aztecs and the early Chinese. Yeah, so this painting can kind of give you an idea on how they did very basic aquaponics back in the day. So what you're seeing here is basically the early Aztecs and stuff, they created these floating islands that they would have had floating on ponds with fish in it, and they basically plant the plants on it. And when this island floats out into that pond, right, the roots will go into the water and it will get a certain measure of nutrients. Yeah. And they would use that for their growth and development, and they would also have fish growing in the ponds as well. Yeah. So as we could see, this is just a comparison here showing you the paintings from the early Aztecs, etc. And then if we look at the bottom, we could actually see photographs. Yeah, photographs of how long ago they actually did those types. So it's not something that just they're not painting and it may or may not have happened, right? It really did happen, and these structures you're seeing here in the bottom photos actually show you where persons would have done this type of aquaponics back in the day. Aquaponics is still done in its prehistoric form in places like Indonesia, right, where they do something called pisciculture. So in rice fields, they need to have channels, right, throughout the rice fields to keep it inundated with water, because rice is C4 plants, and if you do a little research, you'll see that they could grow inundated in water, and that's the preferred condition, right, for growth. So basically, what this particular type of system with these rice fields, what these people in Indonesia, etc., do, instead of just having the channels with just water in it, they fill it with fish, crayfish, turtles, all different species of farm in there. And they're able to grow two crops instead of one, both the rice and the aquatic species. And in addition to that, the aquatic species release waste into the water, which fertilizes the rice. So ultimately, this is a very basic form of aquaponics. Okay? Right? So we spoke about this drawbacks of aquaculture and hydroponics. Right? So aquaculture generates nutrient-rich wastewater, right, which can have environmental consequences. And hydroponics requires nutrients, which could be expensive, to feed the plants. And it's also a non-organic production method. And as we all know, anything labeled organic with food right now is ultimately 4 or 5 times the cost, not even double. Yeah. So I saw a cabbage in True Value, and it just had a label on it, marked organic. Nothing else in it. Where not where it come from, no anything. A normal small cabbage, it was $50. So why aquaponics? It is a proven technology since the 1970s. It produces two crops instead of just one, vegetables and fish. Demand for more locally grown organic food. So there's an increasing demand for vegetables and fish for health reasons. Yeah, because um, the protein from fish is actually one of the more healthier forms of proteins that you could consume. There's also an increased cost for water, fertilizer, fuel, etc. So traditional agriculture will be faced with these constraints, because if the prices go up, which means um, it will become more expensive to farm, and this could prove problematic when you look at feasibility in your farm enterprise, etc. Yeah. So with aquaponics, because you don't have to, because they're very water conservative, you're generating fertilizers for free, no need for fuel per se. Yeah, you could really you're really a step ahead of the game, right? Because you're not constrained to these things anymore. There's a higher productivity in aquaponics as well. In addition to that, also no weeding, no weeding is necessary. Yeah, because everything is grown out of the soil. So in a controlled environment, so basically you're never really subjected to anything like weeds or anything like that. And you have less waste than aquaculture and hydroponics. Yeah, so we touched on that earlier. So how does it work? How does aquaponics work? So basically, you have your fish. So an example given here was tilapia, right? It produces ammonia. The ammonia is converted to nitrites. The nitrites converted to nitrates. We're familiar with this one with the nitrification, and when we discuss the biofilter, right? But with aquaponics now, you're going one step further. So instead I just have the nitrates being taken back to the aquaculture section, you actually have a plant component now after that nitrate is converted. And the plant component will have obviously plants in it. And they now will utilize this nitrates for growth and development. And by so doing, remove the nitrates from the system. So clean water now goes back to the fish. And then the cycle continuously perpetuates. Local potential. So aquaponics is picking up in popularity here locally, right? And these are just some examples in newspapers, Newsday, Guardian, etc., Daily Express, where we're seeing different aquaponics projects and stuff like that being done throughout the country. It might not be sensitized to it, but it is being done. And again, it's not even something that is really expanding just locally. We would have worked on projects in Grenada and stuff like that. I will share a short video with you all as well, where we introduce aquaponics throughout into these Caribbean islands, and they're utilizing it in school systems as part of the school feeding program and all these things. So there's a lot of potential to be had with aquaponics. So this is just a short little clip of an aquaponics project that I would have done in Grenada, right? Um, through UE as well as my company as well. So it was a more of a kind of collaborative effort where we went to Grenada, and together with the organization there, the Olive Branch Project was able to set up the first school-based type aquaponics system, right, that they would use now to teach physics, chemistry, biology, agricultural science, because all of these principles basically is involved or could be found in an aquaponic system. Yeah, from water chemistry to pumps and water flows. You have your fish, so you could study reproductive biology, growth, all these different things. Agricultural science, because they're dealing with plants, they're dealing with aquaculture, etc., etc. Yeah. So again, and the produce from this system, from these systems that being established in the schools, will now be reintegrated back into the school feeding program. So the students are now able to basically more or less generate their own food and feed themselves as well, while learning science. Yeah. So again, this short video will just highlight the project, and you would actually see some of the potential that aquaponics has.
Well, today what we're really doing is building the system here. This is a new system, first like that in Grenada. I believe this system is basically for Woman Methodist School, but also it can be used as a model for aquaponics within the school system. There's a few other schools with have system that mightn't be like this, might be different type of systems. So basically the technical, a lot of technicality went into this one. First time I have seen it just the same way from the team from UU is here.
By being able now to produce fish, to produce vegetables in a sustainable manner, in a manner that does not require traditional, how can I put it, productive lands, because it could be done in almost any type of environment, because the soilless culture, right, and fishes and other aquatic organisms are basically grown in tanks.
You're learning a lot. The team of guys from within the community, okay, and the village here, everybody will get a glimpse of this thing and the experience to come and use it and see what it is all about. The Methodist school in Woburn, the kids within the 4-H clubs, the teachers, and Ministry of Large will benefit from this mostly for the ending up of the day. the whole scientific idea behind these things, I believe is great for the community. The effort and everything I put in it, I thank everyone and even the sponsor for giving us this opportunity.
Building a system like this here in Grenada for the Olive Branch project for the first time was a little difficult. We had some minor challenges along the way. One of the major challenges being sourcing materials to build the system. In addition to that, other minor challenges were sourcing the other pieces of equipment like uniseals, etc., to make the filtration system. But that wasn't much of a challenge because our company, Aquatic Solutions, we actually supply those things. So we brought those over readily, but the bigger items was a bit challenging. Other than that, getting it up in the system and running our climates are pretty much similar in terms of rainfall, the air temperature. So we expect that the system will perform to the same capacity as they perform back in Trinidad. So other than that, I think everything is smooth sailing from here.
Well, we could say that we 95% accomplished. And now we're heading to open up on the 10th of January, which is next episode. And right now we're trying to embark on a lot of young children that are ready to be part of this thing. We have a drinker man that just come lately with us. And to me, he's just like somebody like me, how he put all into it to really get things done. And that's how we are here today. As well, he come to assist me. If I need, he could continue, which is a plus for us right now. We'll be looking for more students and elderly people who doing farming, and now we're trying now to embark on a lot of guys who are interested into this system here. Because we're going all what we want to eat inside here. Down to the fish. We have lettuce, we have watercress. Just last Thursday put in the lettuce inside, and you can see how it's reaching right now. So we could see that the growth is there. So the next week or so we have lettuce to eat.
My name is Afar Roberts and I'm involved with the Aquaponics project at the Woven Materials because I think it's a good thing for young persons like myself to learn. But I also think that, it is beneficial to us, young persons, and I did agriculture before, but not short crops. I moved with crops like nutmeg and so on. And I think more young persons should get involved because it is something good to learn. And going forward, I think that this would be the future of agriculture in Grenada. Farming. Well, from the time I've been here, I've observed that you can use fish, the bacteria from fish, to plant crops. I never knew that, and I thank Mr. Melvon and my teacher there for showing me how to handle this up here. Well, I plan to, take as much as I can get from this project because in the future maybe I can build something of my own.
So yeah, so that's just a video just highlighting a bit of what we would have done, what we would have started in Grenada. The project is now being expanded through several other schools throughout the island, and we trying to aim at doing different types of systems, different models. So aquaponic system designs. So there are three primary aquaponic methods that is currently being utilized, right? This no, there are different types of methods, but these are the three most common that we will find throughout Trinidad as well as throughout the Caribbean as well. Yeah, the flood and drain method, right? Deep water culture, and the nutrient film technique. Yeah. So basically with the flood and drain method, we basically growing plants in a, how could I put it, in a grow bed where we have some sort of substrate in there, not soil, right? The substrate must be in it. Yeah. So you could either fill things like this, something called expanded clay, right? Or gravel. Yeah. So you basically fill these grow beds with that, right? So just think about like a typical bowl or a container, but just bigger, right? On average, about a foot deep, and it could be almost any dimension that you want. Not too big, right? But large enough, 4 by 4, etc. And you fill it with this grow media and you put your plants in it. So what the grow media will do is provide support for your plants, right? And in the flood and drain, we're basically flooding it out with nutrients from the fish, yeah, or from the aquaculture section, and that water fills to a certain height and then it automatically drains. So that's why they call it flood and drain. And every time it floods, right, they're getting nutrients and water being delivered to your plants, and when it drains, you get air. Yeah, so again, water, nutrients, and air from that system. The deep water culture system, the photo to the top right, really is you having a, so you have your grow trough, right? Your same kind of grow bed, right? Around 16 inches deep, but inside you fill it with a grow media, you fill it with water, and you put your plants to float on the styrofoam, right? That's on the surface, and the roots of the plants will basically be immersed in the water. And so if you look, you see how nice and wide those roots are, and that absorbing all the nutrients from within that system and using it for growth and development. And you can see how healthy the plants are as well. And if you remember the ancient photos that I would have shown you when I did the introduction into aquaponics, and I showed you that the Aztecs did these floating islands, right, out in open ponds, and they're planted in these islands with the roots of the plants in the water, right? So basically, what you see in there is basically in this photo is the modern day method of that particular type of farming. Yeah, because it's almost the same concept. And then in the bottom photo, we have an NFT system, or basically the nutrient film technique, where we utilize a thin film of nutrient-rich water, right? And the plants, once the roots are immersed in it, they will absorb that nutrients and use it for growth and development. Yeah. So basically, when we go along, we will go into this a little bit more in detail. So the first one is the flood and drain, right? Which is the one to the top left, this photo here. So basically, this is the mechanism behind it. You have your fish tank with your fish in it. You have your pump pumping that nutrient-rich water up into your grow bed. Now, these are very simplistic layout just to show the major concept. All right, so you might have filters and stuff in between, but for the purpose of the explanation, we're just looking at fish, a pump, right, and your grow beds. However, some people with this type of aquaponics, they leave out the filter because sometimes what happens is that because they're growing these plants in a substrate like gravel, the gravel also acts as a filter as well. Yeah? So basically, with your flood and drain aquaponics system, your fish producing waste, the pump pumps it up into these grow beds. It fills to a certain height and then it drains. It fills and then it drains. And every time it fills and drains, as I said before, you get water and nutrients and then you get air. So the water automatically drains by something called a automatic siphon. Yeah. Or basically what this is just a device. You can fabricate it out of PVC, etc. And when the water fills to a certain height, it causes this device to trigger, and when it triggers, it sucks all the water out of the system and drains it back into the tank. And then the entire water in this bed goes back down, straight down to the bottom. At the same time, the water is continuously being filled, and over time it will fill back up again, and then this will trigger and it will drain again. And the water is still filling, and it will fill, and it will drain, it will fill back up to the top, and then it will trigger the siphon and it will drain back again. That's why they call it flood and drain, because it goes through flood and drain, flood and drain, flood and drain continuously. Yes, so these are some of the media that you can put inside of the grow beds. Remember, I tell you about the gravel, right? So you have your grow bed, which is basically a container, and you fill it up with gravel and you put your plants in it, and you fill it with the nutrients rich water from the fish. It fills to a certain height and then it drains automatically because of the siphon you have in it. So it could either be gravel, it could be things like hydroton, right? Hydroton is basically like these round pebbles made out of clay. Um, the non-toxic, they don't dissolve, they're very lightweight and porous, so they absorb a little bit of nutrients and water on the surface. So it's a nice grow media to utilize, but when you're looking at large systems, it might be a bit on the expensive side. Yeah. So always using gravel is a good option, right? Because again, it's cheap and it's readily available locally. So in an aquaponics system, right, or the flood and drain aquaponics system, the grow media has certain functions to play or certain roles to perform. The first is it provides structural support because it's um, a solid media. When you plant your plants in it, the roots of the plants able to grow out within that gravel or the hydrogen and remain stable. It stabilizes that plant. So imagine you plant something like a tomatoes plant, right? That will grow extensive root system. So it don't matter how much weight the tomatoes take on the top, the roots are anchored amongst that grow media. It provides filtration, both mechanical and biological. So remember when it is I shared recirculating or we did recirculating aquaculture systems, you all would have seen a simple filter I built with a bucket. And I said, that's my bucket filter. I'd use some pigtail buckets, the 5 gallon buckets, right? So basically that was a bucket filled with gravel. If you go back in your notes or your slides, you would see it, right? And um, that is almost exactly how this system will look like to a certain extent, because when you fill, if you take that water directly from the fish tank with the waste in it and you flood it into a flood and drain grow bed, it's as though you're passing water through that gravel filter and it will capture the solids on it. So that grow bed really performs both mechanical filtration because it removes the solids when the water flows through it, and in addition to that, it also performs a biological filtration role as well because you will get beneficial bacteria building up on all the surfaces of that grow media. Yeah. It provides temperature moderation around the root zone, allows for air and water exchange around the root zone, right? So the size of the particles determines how well it holds air and water. So these are just some properties of a good media for a flood and drain system. It must not change the pH of your water, right? Remember I told you all when we did pH, we saw how important pH is. Right. So, 1 second. Yeah, we saw how important pH is. Yeah. So whatever grow media you're utilizing, a key thing is it must not change or affect the pH of your system, because again, fishes need a certain pH, or aquatic species need a certain pH to basically operate or thrive the best at, right? Your plants also need a particular pH as well, right? To basically maximize on their growth and development. Yeah. So it's like all these organisms has a optimum pH to operate at. So you don't want to utilize agro media that would change or affect this pH in any particular way. It must never decompose. Avoid media such as coconut coir, wood chips, etc. Because over time, if these things inundated with water, what will happen is that the water will cause some sort of decay of these materials, and that is not good for your system. You must also size, um, you must also use proper sizes, something that's not too small, neither too big. Imagine if you're using gravel and instead of you use gravel, you go on as fine as sharp sand, or you go as large as those kind of big boulders. right? So you realize if you go too large, it wouldn't retain water, like the water will just flow through that, and your plants wouldn't really be able to anchor itself or support itself. And if it's too small, that those small particles could be clogged relatively easy by any waste that it might be coming in contact with. And because of that, you want to always use maybe like around half-inch to three-quarter-inch gravel is real good size to utilize for an aquaponic system. So gravel is a very good support material because it's good for it's a good medium for plant roots. It's well aerated, it's cheap and relatively inexpensive. Gravel with sharp edges can damage or cut your plant roots, so be mindful of that. It also is very heavy, so increased. So if you're using gravel as your grow media in your flood and drain bed, you want to make sure that that flood and drain bed is very well supported. Yeah. It really hold water that well. The expanded clay will hold water much better than the gravel, right? So your expanded clay, many benefits, lightweight and porous, free draining, physical structure allows for accumulation of water and nutrient elements, reusable if sterilized, right? And it's commonly used in flood and drain hydroponic systems as well as in NFT systems as supporting media. Yeah. So these are some advantages and disadvantages of a flood and drain system. So the advantages, this is an easy customizable design, right? The media provides better plant support. So the media bed performs both mechanical and biological filtration, and a variety of crops can be grown. One of the major disadvantages with a flood and drain system is that expansion of the existing systems can be difficult. Yeah, so it's not as simple as you'll just increase the size of your beds and make a double production, etc. You have to factor in a lot of different things like, will the siphon be big enough to do a bed twice the volume? Um, different things like that you have to consider. Yeah, the nutrient film technique. Right? So the nutrient film technique is a very popular method, right? Because even getting the materials for nutrient film technique is very easy as well as easily accessible, because again you're utilizing PVC channels or grow pipes to grow your plants in. So basically with a nutrient film technique, you have your fish tank, you have your filters, your mechanical, your biological, just like how you have your normal recirculating aquaculture system, you have that, right? And Mama showed you all in the photo, the early photo, where the basically what you're doing, you're just putting the plant component be, between the filters and the fish tank. So when the water goes through the filters and the solids are removed, ammonia is converted to nitrates, then you have the plants. So the plants now will utilize that nitrates, and clean water will basically go back to your fish. Yeah. So a common question is commonly asked is, what type of grow pipes are best suited for aquaponics, right? And the thing about it is there are several different options, right? And each option will work best for a particular type of crop. Yeah. Generally, I will not recommend 2-inch. You could use 2-inch PVC for like things like hydroponics when you're just growing plants alone. But in aquaponics, I will not recommend it, because in aquaponics, you get things like filamentous bacteria and these different things depositing and building up within systems, etc. And 2 inches are a relatively small size of pipe. And to avoid chances of it clogging or anything like that, it's better to go with 3-inch or larger. Yeah, so 3-inch is really my preferred um, pipe of choice, or grow pipe of choice for aquaponics. So the systems to the top, so the top left is a 2-inch system, the middle system is a 3-inch, the system to the right is a 4-inch, and all of these are systems what I would have done, in addition to also to the system on the bottom, which is built out of 2x4 rectangular pipes. Yes, we have different pipe options and different things you could utilize for NFT aquaponics. So the hydroponic components in nutrient film technique group pipe and shape. Choose pipe with the optimum diameter for the target plant. Plants with extensive root systems can clog smaller pipes. Pipes with a square cross section are usually the best. However, wrong pipes are more common and cheaper. And these are examples of produce I would have grown using my NFT system at home. So what you see I holding there is okra. Yes, so you can see the size of the okra and how well it was growing in that system. And again, this is growing these plants without any additional fertilizers or anything. Everything was from the waste product of my aquaculture system. This is also some photos of some different crops. Well, basically some cucumbers I would have grown in my aquaponics system. And you can see the quality of these cucumbers. And this basically just 12 lengths of 3-inch pipe. And you can see the kind of harvest that I was able to get. And with cucumbers, is continuous harvest for several days well. So you can imagine the kind of production, the productivity that I got out of this system. Yeah, so this short vid will show how well the growth can be like with the aquaponic system once balanced and designed properly. So no fertilizers or artificial fertilizers or anything was used in the system. Everything is natural from the fish. Yeah, so you can see the cucumbers and thing, and the thing about it is the plants growing on these pipes, plants will naturally gravitate towards light. So all the vines and everything would have remained to the top layer or to the surface, and the cucumbers would have just hung down just under the pipes. So when you go under those racks, you're just seeing rows of cucumbers just ready to be picked. And I grew this at a time when the weather conditions was real bad in terms of we had excessive rains down south. And I know the challenges a lot of farmers was facing at that point in time, with too much moisture and getting fungal problems and all these things. I had nothing to worry about. I've grown cover in the bottom, right? If the rain fall, no problem. Plants adapted to take rainwater. So that water just roll off the leaves in a couple of minutes. Everything is completely dry and I was fine again. So that's the same NFT system that I grew the cucumbers on, and these are some bronze lettuce that I did on it as well. Grown in an organic fashion, obviously, because again, it's utilizing the wastewater from the fish tanks. And this is a modification to the NFT, something called the deep flow technique. And the nutrient film technique, the key thing is that you always have a thin film of nutrients at the bottom of your grow pipes. With the deep flow technique, what you're doing, you're blocking both ends of your pipe and you're flooding it almost halfway with water. And then you're putting in small net pots at the top of them pipes so the roots can just touch the water in those pipes. One of the biggest challenges with that is that over time, those pipes with the water inside of those pipes tends to heat up and it throws off your production. So nutrient film technique, pros and cons. Materials readily available, can be easily customized, no concerns for pH changes, pH change related changes to the media, requires more filtration, and a limited variety of crops can be grown. Because you wouldn't grow something like baigan or any one of those larger crops with larger root masses. Yeah. With a deep water culture system, right? Basically, I have a fish tank. The nutrient-rich wastewater goes into your grow bed or your grow trough, and basically the plants there utilize that for their growth and development, and clean water goes back to your fishes. Yeah. So basically, with that deep water culture system, you have your plants floating on a nutrient-rich source of water. Okay. So deep water culture systems typically 16 inches deep, diameter not critical and can vary 2, 3, 4 feet, etc. Length can vary, needs to be heavily aerated, right? So the deep water culture system, aeration is key. If you do add insufficient aeration, your plants will not survive or they will grow very poorly because plant roots need a lot of dissolved oxygen. And once you have your roots in large volumes of water, dissolved oxygen can be a bit on the difficult side to get via natural processes. A key thing as well is that the floating rafts you're using for your deep water culture trough. So which is basically we're seeing these two people holding to the bottom, like that raft with pak choy. Right. So you must not utilize a raft, which is what the white thing that they're holding there. Right. You must not utilize one that absorbs water because over time it will absorb water and it will just end up sinking. Yeah, you want to use high density. I just use around 2 pound density for my grow beds or my floating rafts. So this is an example of a commercial aquaponics system done in the University of the Virgin Islands, and this was spearheaded by Professor John Rakosi, right? So basically, I have floating rafts. So one of those rafts you're looking at is about 100 feet long, right? And there are 6 of those and 4 big fish tanks, and they're able to supply all those grow beds from their system. Yeah. So this is an example of a very simple deep water culture system that I would have fabricated, right? So this is more or less utilizing a lot of recycled materials at home. Yeah. So from that system, so this system basically consisted of one fish tank with 55 tilapia, um, some greenhouse plastic that I used to make my trough that I would have floated my styrofoam in, and that was 20 feet by 4 feet by 16 inches. Right, simple filters and everything I built. And I set up the system, and with 35 tilapia, I was able to grow that parsley, that shadow benny, tomatoes, and several other different types of crops. So that is how the system was looking like when I had now planted out. These are some of the produce that we got from it. So I wanted to see the great variety of produce, right? Like unlike hydroponics, where you could more or less is more or less suited for monocropping. With aquaponics, you could grow multiple crops together. That's why when you're looking at home gardening and different things like that, aquaponics is a really good option for that because you could do many different crops. And in addition to that, you could also grow your fish as well in the aquaculture section. Right, so these are some sides I had from the system before and after. As some clients who came home, I need to check out some of the systems, and we did a workshop as well. Celery, you can see the size. Spinach, mustard greens, lettuce. Yeah, so you can see the quality of this lettuce as well, and I harvested that out of the system. Yeah, so that's me there holding up the lettuce for size comparison. And you can see the size of the shadow benny as well, and all these things naturally fertilized. Parsley as well. Tomatoes. So advantages of a deep water culture system are great for commercial setups. So the University of the Virgin Islands, like why I shared the photo that I shared with you all there, that would actually be, but that is actually is a commercial model that a lot of persons have utilized and adopted around the world, right? To basically make their own unique type of systems, but the general principle applies across the board, right, with respect to design and all these different set of things, right? So those types of systems great for commercial setups. So the UVI also has everything worked out in terms of how much feed you need to feed the fish when it comes in, to the type and the amount you feed in the fish when before it exits. And you could work up your whole cost of production on the aquaculture section. You could work some calculations, determine how much plants it could grow. And basically, you could be able to do your own thing, right? So with the deep water culture setup, great for commercial setup. So as I said before, the University of the Virgin Islands, because they pioneered that first model, what you would find in around the world will just be again adaptations of that particular model. Yeah, it has a very high yield of both fish and plant crops, and it can produce a variety of crops. One of the disadvantages, it requires extensive filtration because we don't want solid waste building up in the troughs, right? It's site specific, land needs to be prepared, and it could be costly to be, it could be relatively costly to set up, right? Through the use of pond liners, etc., to use to build those big long troughs. Because again, like the UVI models are 100 feet long, so pond liner and things for that could run you up to quite a cost. Okay. Any questions so far?
Yeah, if nobody else want to ask, I have one.
No problem.
Okay, so my question is this: with hydroponics, I see when people transplant them, they would normally buy seedlings that come in premix, and
Right.
they put it in a hydroponic system. There's the NFC system.
Right.
But with aquaponics, what I noticed is that my immediate observation that will contribute a lot of solids into the system itself. So how you germinating? What method are you using for seeds?
Right.
Seedlings rather.
Right. So what you could do, you could use something like cocoa core, cocoa peat to germinate your seeds in. But what I typically do, I use the same premix, right? The seeds in the premix, but why do I give it? I kind of just, I take my seedlings out of the tray and I will put them in a bucket with water. Like not for long or soak it or anything. Just taking it out of the tray, putting it in there, and in a couple of seconds it will soak up and absorb that water, and I just shake the plants a little bit in there, and 99, like the majority of that premix will fall off the roots, right? And then I will put it into the aquaponics system. Now with the hydro, I don't really bother with it, right? But with the aquaponics, I really want to get out as much as that solids as I could at that earlier stage. So just giving your plant roots a gentle little washout could help with the removal of most of those particles around the roots. However, if you want to grow it in another media like the cocoa peat, right? So that's coconut fiber, and that's way easier. If you just dip that in some water as well, it will clean up all of that wash out most of those cocoa peat around the roots. So that's also an option to go with too. Yeah. What they do internationally, there's usually things like Rockwell cubes, which is these little things like these little cubes, like you know how your ice tray will be like with your cubes of ice. Well, the Rockwell cubes are a bit smaller, but they set the seeds and those. It's like this kind of fiber, spongy type of material. You set your seeds in that, and you take that now and put it directly into your system. But that is very expensive, and it really doesn't make sense to go through that with your aquaponic system.
The question is this: with traditional agriculture, when you're harvesting, you either do so early in the morning or late in the evening. What about NFT system?
I would recommend the same thing as well. because what happens is that with an NFT system, your plants do get some heat stress during the day, right? Which leads to partial wilting just by nature of the type of system that you have. Not that your plants will wilt down, but the cells and everything will have maximum amount of water in it. It will be turgid and everything. Early morning, late evening. So I always prefer to harvest then.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Right. For doing aquaculture in areas that floods. Right. So that is a tricky thing. What you want to do, if you had to do aquaculture in areas that floods, one to start with, you don't want to utilize pond culture, right? Because that is going to end up in real problems, right? You had to make sure that you had to set up your tanks such that even if you put on, you had to know the maximum height those floodlands come up to. If your floodland coming up to like 1 foot in height, then it should not be much of an issue because 1 foot, 2 foot, because most aquaculture tanks are recommended, is recommended height is around 4 feet. Yeah. The only thing you have to be mindful of is your sump tank, which will be a bit lower than that, right? So you can kind of design your system where the tanks can kind of be a little more elevated than usual. So everything else will be still a certain height above the ground. So even though floods come, it will not flood into your system. But that is a very critical thing to consider because the last thing you want is the flood to come up so high that it gets and it floods out your system. Yeah. So that's how they kind of cater for that and know how we can make those necessary adjustments. Right. So like a typical example, if you look at this photo I have here, right? So these are aquaponics system where you're watching here, like with the mouse is on. If you look at the bottom photo, right, you see in between the NFT system and the IBC tanks, both top and bottom, right? You would see there's some half a tanks on blocks. Well, this is my deep water culture system here, right? But you see the same idea now? Let we assume I was growing fish inside of these, well, I am growing fish in these IBC tanks. And in an area that floods and floods come like 1 feet, 2 feet and thing. To be on the safe side, I could set up my system and I could just put my tanks on blocks and keep it elevated. Yeah. So even though floods and thing come, it will not again harm your system. Yeah. So design of aquaponic units. Mhm. Yeah, Jared, no problem. So design of aquaponic units. Essential components of an aquaponic unit consist of, as we mentioned at the start of the presentation, the aquaculture subsection, which is your fish tank, your mechanical filter, your biofilter, and then your hydroponic subsection, right? So your plant growth area, whether it's an NFT channel, a deep water culture grow bed, or a flood and drain grow bed, right? So we went through the schematic when we did the recirculating aquaculture system. So we have the fish tank, mechanical filter, biofilter, everything recirculated back to the fish tank. Right? So these are the major components of an aquaponic system. So just like what we saw before, right? When we covered aquaculture, the recirculating aquaculture systems, I use the same diagram and I show you every fish in a fish tank. Waste comes out, filters out in the mechanical filter, goes into the biofilter, and then it goes back into the fish tank. Okay. So with aquaponics, between the biofilter and the return to the fish tank, we put our plants. Because in the biofilter, you would have gotten the ammonia being converted to nitrates. So when you put the plants here now, they will feed off of those nitrates and clean water will go back into the tank. So this is what we see in here. Fish tank, biofilter, mechanical filter, sorry, fish tank, mechanical filter, biofilter, your sump tank, yeah? And you have your pump, pumping the water now. So with aquaculture, this line will just return back to the fish. But with aquaponics, it going into a plant trough or NFT channel. It feeding all the roots of these plants. They utilizing the nutrients, etc., for growth and development. And by feeding off of the nutrients and that thin film, they basically purify or remove that from the system, and clean water goes back to the fish. Right, so again, these are some major components of aquaponic systems, and this is an example of a model that I would have built and demonstrated at UE for the Tech Agri Expo, which is an expo that they have annually, but because of COVID, things was kind of shut down last year and for this year, right? But so these are models we presented there, and basically for the general design and layout, I would use this as an example, and I'll just play this video here so you will have an idea what the major components are with a system like this. Good day, my name is Rakesh Kukal. I'm Manager Director of Aquaponics Solutions. So here we have a hybrid aquaponic system. It's a combination of deep aquaculture and NFT, right? On display at the Tech Agri Expo 2018 UWI, right? So what I'm going to do now is give you a basic run through of exactly what this system is using. So to the back here, we have our fish grow tank, right? This tank here is stuck with 50 tilapia fish, Nile, and here we have catfish, right? So these fishes actually fuel the entire aquaponic system. The water flows out of these two tanks into our filtration system, which is composed of 3 spool filters, right? So if you have a closer look at it here, you can actually see the circular pattern in which the water is actually flowing, right? What this does is allow all the solids within the system to settle to the bottom, and then we simply tap it out from the bottom, right? So as we go along, right, I'll run you through all the different components that actually consist of this, right? So from the fish ground system, after the water is filtered, throughout the filtration system, it goes into our plant ground bed, right? So to my left and to my right, what we have is the deep water culture component of this system, right? Deep water culture, or DWC, basically consists of floating styrofoam over nutrient-rich water that comes out of the fish tank, right? So we have a variety of crops to actually grow in deep water culture. A typical example is broad lettuce, right? So these two systems are equivalent. If we look to the middle here, right, we have what we call our sump tank, right? Apart from taking water and distributing it to our grow beds, it also sends water back to our fish tanks and to the other component of our system, which is the NFT grow rack, right? In our NFT grow rack, we grow a variety of crops as well. So what I'll do, I'll basically go through the basic layout of the system so we can have an idea how it's actually composed of and connected to the system. So you can take a walk around. This system is composed, is designed, and is built out of using 3-inch PVC pipe, right? 3-inch as opposed to different sizes of pipe open to have the greatest flexibility in production, because it's just large enough to do the variety of crops with the larger root masses, right? And it's also small enough so that when you do crops like lettuce and things, it wouldn't be too far down inside a pipe, like a point where you would be hampered from getting adequate sunlight. So it's honestly the ideal size of pipe based on our experience for aquaponic production. Right, so we can go along and as you can see, we have different crops that we have growing here. Most of it is our typical leafy greens, lettuce, side, pak choy, celery, but we also have tomato plants within the system, and they also do well also. Right, so as we go along, so the system actually, each one of these plant grow racks houses approximately 135 plants. So we have a capacity between the two racks, right, to do 270 plants in total, right, from just one component. So to the back of the racks, we have our control manifold, right? So it's basically composed of a series of valves that we can alter the flooring. So depending on the type of crop we're growing, all the type of plants and the stage of, and the different stages of growth, we can allow different flows in each one of the growth channels. So that will allow for maximum efficiency within production. So as we go along to the middle of these tracks, we can see the general layout of how it's actually connected within the system. Right? So basically the nutrient flows down, it services all the plants, and then go back down into the sump tank. Right? And as you can see, everything begins and ends in the sump. Right? So it's equivalent at the heart of our system, and everything operates with one pump. Right now, I must make special mention that any properly designed system operates with just one pump. Anytime you're using two pumps or more, that gives the indication the system is not properly designed. Right? So the entire system is operated by a Rizon King 6 submersible water pump, right? And it services our entire aquaponics system. Right? So this is our basic setup. Any further questions, you can always contact us via our numbers that would be on our Facebook page, Aquatic Solution. It could be found on Facebook. And yeah, so that's basically it. Yes, so I hope the demonstration there gave a little better and a little further insight into how the different components are connected in an aquaponic system. Yeah, so any questions on that system layout or how the different components are connected or why they're connected the way they are, etc.? So everybody understands the general layout, right? And no questions on that. All right, nice. Right, so actually this is another similar model that I did as well. So you'll get more of a kind of aerial view on it, right? So I might just walk you through it. Now this would have to be put on that shredder, the fish tanks, or covered at least. The tanks would be painted and covered. Yeah, this one I literally now finished fabricating it. And I was just doing the test run on it. So in the back here will be 2 fish tanks, filtration, sump was where the lowest point in which where the pump is, and the pump pumps that water to both grow beds, back to the fish tanks, and to the NFT channels here as well. Yeah. So design of aquaponics units, fish tanks. Several important aspects to consider. Most common tank shape, circular, rectangular, square. Now we would have covered this when we did recirculating aquaculture systems and we did the components there for tanks, etc. Right, so the same rules apply to aquaponics because remember, aquaponics is just aquaculture and hydroponics. So everything that would apply to the tanks and stuff for aquaculture also applies in aquaponics. Yeah, so I will skip through this very fast because this is also similar to what we would have covered before. They both share the same similarities, right? 2 primary types, mechanical, biological. The mechanical, important for NFT and deep water culture systems, right? Because with NFT and DWC units, right, what you find happening is that if you get solids from your fish tanks, building up within these 2 types of systems, they could come in contact with your plant roots and it could cause problems because what happens is that they could coagulate around or cluster around your roots and create an anaerobic zone, right? Meaning your plants wouldn't be able to get oxygen, your roots, and it could eventually cause different types of problems, and your plant roots could actually die off as well. Right, so suspended waste could build up in grow pipes and troughs and clog the root surfaces, right? Also solid waste accumulates on blocks, pumps and plumbing, etc. Okay, and these are popular mechanical filters, simple ones, right? So Mama was telling about the gravel filter from before, right? This is what I was mentioning before. So with your flood and drain grow bed, just like how you had this bucket here with some gravel in it, your flood and drain grow bed will just be a bigger container with about 12 inches of gravel. And when the solids from the system flows onto it, right, the solids actually, so when the water fills in these flood and drain grow beds, what happens is that the water will completely drain out, and that solids now will basically go within the gravel, and over time it breaks down. Yeah, so when that happens, it both filters the water, mechanical filtration, performs mechanical filtration and biological filtration. Yeah. So a biofilter responsible for ammonia conversion, right? So we did this whole process already, ammonia to nitrites and nitrates, right? So the bacteria again in aquaponics, the fish produce ammonia, ammonia convert to nitrites, convert to nitrates, and the nitrates are utilized by the plants for growth. So biofiltration is essential in aquaponics. Ammonia and nitrites are toxic to fish, and plants need nitrates to grow. Mama was explaining this to you all, right? So, so the ammonia and nitrites toxic to fish, so that needs to be removed. And when it's converted, it forms into nitrates, and the nitrates are what plants need for growth and development. So biofiltration is crucial. It's a crucial component of NFT and DWC systems. It's designed to have a large surface area located between mechanical filter and grow beds, because you need that ammonia converted to nitrates before that water flows to your plants. It's better to oversize than undersize, right? So the general rule is that it should be 1/6 of the size of the fish tank, and that's a biofilter. Right, so biological or biofilter material, it increases the surface area for the colonization of nitrifying bacteria. It needs to have a high surface area to volume ratio. It must be inert, easy to rinse, right? So these are some examples of commercially. So we did these already: gravel, buttercups, pot scrubs. Key points: aeration, establishing biofilter. We spoke about cycling, using things like pond starter, aeration, spoke about that already too, right? All of these are very crucial in aquaponics, right? So you could either use air blowers, you need air stones, etc., to aerate that water. For high-end species and stuff, you could use dissolved oxygen directly, right? Like in those oxygen cylinders and tanks, but for the most part, aeration is sufficient. Right, so pumps, air blowers, air stones. Don't know if I shared this video with you all before, but this is basically how aeration works with the addition of oxygen. And again, oxygen is critical for fish, plants, and bacteria. Right, so that's a point out again. You can see the kind of agitation the air stones are making in this reservoir. Yeah, and it's in here that the pump is. So if you have like a biofilter material and stuff inside of here as well, it will also aerate that as well. And this is how aeration works in a fish tank. I think I shared this with you all before. So air stones, air diffusers, all these things are utilized. You need a pump, Either it could either be external or it could be submersible, right? Submersible means it goes inside of the water. External means it's on the outside and it's just connected to the tanks and the reservoirs, etc. Other equipment you might use: backup power, lights, automatic feeder, computerized water quality monitoring equipment, etc. So what can we grow in aquaponics? A variety of aquatic species, over 300 plus types of crops, and a range of aquatic species. Yes, so we're growing things like crayfish, prawns, lettuce, pak choy, okra, chive, parsley, tomatoes, cucumbers, you name it. So one of the biggest questions a lot of persons ask, or a problem a lot of persons, a primary question that they ask is, what type of fish is best for my aquaponics? Yeah. So they're always torn between ornamental versus food fish. Yeah. Because some people, they like the ornamental fish, right? They like the koi, the goldfish. They're not really fancy. They don't really fancy growing fish for food, or they don't like to eat fish, right? So ornamentals can be a very good choice for them, right? However, it has some people like me who, I mean, if you're doing agriculture and you want to be food, self-sustain yourself and all of these different set of things, grow everything you can eat, both fish and plants. So ornamental versus food fish, right? Honestly, for real commercial enterprises, again, it all comes back down to your objectives, right? But both will grow plants, right? So the plants is like the denominator within, is a common between the both, right? But in terms of the fish, it all depends. Yeah. So ornamentals, there are several varieties to choose from, right? Excellent for small scale systems, locally available, ready market, huge export potential, aesthetically pleasing. So again, varieties are ever increasing with the ornamental industry. Koi, goldfish, discus, right? Flower horns, guppies, you name it, right? And the thing about it is, you'll grow a fish in aquaponics. You might grow a tilapia. It will take you grow tilapia from 2 inches all the way to 6 inches to like a pong and a half, and you'll get about $18 plus for a pong of fish. Yeah. Anybody ever did ornamentals before? Who have an idea what the prices are for ornamentals? Nope. Right. Okay, Sasha. Just to give you a little example, you grow a tilapia, a real big tilapia, is about a 1 pound or 1.5, you might get 18, 20, $25 for that fish. Yeah. About 6 to 8 months and 6, 7 months and like growth time. You grow a discuss, this kind of blue reddish fish to the top left. Those are probably like the palm of my hand, right? One of the pair of those fish get, depending on the variety, and then $3,000 plus. Yeah, depending on the variety. Koi's could sell for thousands of dollars. Goldfish for a couple hundred. Flower horns for quite a bit as well. So again, right, depending on the objectives and thing, the ornamental industry is a very high price industry, meaning the fishes in there, you could do certain varieties and you could make way more money growing two fish than growing a whole tank of tilapia or another type of fish for food. So again, it's a very tricky thing. But again, in terms of selecting which one you might think is better over the other, but it all comes back down to the individual persons. So these are some of the advantages that you would have with the ornamentals. If you want to just make money, you don't really care about growing the fish part for food, right? You could might as well do some ornamentals as well too, right? And again, they way more high valued.
Can you run them together like in two separate tanks?
Yeah, yeah. Once the
One
water
for food.
quality, once the water quality requirements are along the same lines, um, In many instances, koi, plenty of people feed koi tilapia ration. In fact, the koi ration, the koi food, the commercial ones are almost like tilapia pellets. But many commercial producers feed koi's tilapia pellets. Yeah, but you have to also bear in mind koi is also carp, and carp is an aquaculture species. It's just that what we know as koi today is the modern day koi that they would have selectively bred for color. Carp is more popular, is grown in larger quantities than tilapia on a global basis. Is the #1 cultured species around the world. Carp, which is a kind of, which is a type, which is koi. Yeah, and different species as well. Like you keep them in different tanks and feed them different things. So if you have a tank with goldfish and you want to feed them, like we say goldfish, koi sticks or goldfish sticks or goldfish pellets or whatever you want to feed it, they separate in a different tank. You feed them. You hire tilapia in another tank. You feed them the tilapia pellets. The water exits from both systems, joins up, goes into your filters, it filters out, and clean water comes back to your fish after it passes through the hydroponic component. So again, we could do multiple different types of species alongside each other. You can mix certain species together, like food fish and ornamentals. I wouldn't really recommend it too much because I mean, you're really going one for food, one for one, but you could do it as well once the species compatible with each other. Yeah. And you also see it like in aquariums, people is use these thing they call a theta, like just call them plecos. There's be the cleaning, that's called algae eater in the aquarium. That is also used in aquaculture. People eating it. Like they you know what I mean? And and it's live good with ornamentals. People is long from ever since it's always keep those little plecos or let's call it mama tita, the small ones, just be in the aquariums, right, to clean up the glass and thing, and they live in fine. So yeah,
Yellowish color.
yeah, it's be kind of yellowish, kind of brownish kind of way. Yeah. So you can use those, you can keep them and you can keep them together as well too. Yes, the soccer fish, correct. Yes, Tiana. Yeah. So fish, deciding on, so food fish. Food fish in Trinidad, again, we farm 4 major species, tilapia, cascadoo, the shellfish, which could either be a crayfish or a prawn, and then conch. Yeah. So all these could be utilized in aquaponics. The one thing I will not really recommend too much is the conch, but it could be also incorporated. It's just that the waste from the conch, they tend to foul the water a little bit. So they want to do, you could keep a couple conch in your system, because again, people do keep conch in the tanks. Like this golden apple snail. If you go online and you research it, golden apple snail in Trinidad, you'll realize it's found in waterways and things in Trinidad, but it's an invasive species. People release it from the ornamental trade because they used to keep golden apple snails with the in the aquariums and the ponds and all this, because it's a pretty conch. Like how these conchs here black, that golden, a brilliant yellow, a brilliant gold. Yeah. So all these things could be done in aquaponics as well. So we did fish species. We would have covered the majority of these, right? So tilapia is very good for aquaponics, right? It's produce a decent amount of waste, and it can easily be integrated with prawns, crayfish, as well as ornamental species. Good market, good for large scale operations as well. So tilapia is the most common culture species of fish cultured locally. Hardy could withstand relatively poor water quality conditions rapidly. They grow fast, 4 to 6 months growth period, efficient feed conversion, right? Again, good demand. A survey showed that 135 tons of tilapia is consumed annually, with only 22 tons being produced locally, right? So again, there's huge potential for the growth of this industry using tilapia, because as you can see, people consuming a lot of that fish. Right, so we recently covered this. 3 species of tilapia cultured: Nile, black, red hybrid, the blue, but again, not so common with this particular species. Different cuisine, tilapia, tilapia caviar, tilapia, um, sushi, you name it. Different things you could do. Everything you could do with fish from the ocean, you could also do with freshwater fish from aquaculture as well. Cascadoo, another fish of great potential. All right, local delicacy, excellent for polyculture systems such as high price, growth times 4 to 6 months, bimodal respiration. They use oxygen from water and air. Male grows to about 250, 200 millimeters, etc. There's a multiple spawner, about females for each reproductive cycle. They reproduce during the rainy season. They could spawn around 14 times. These are some tilapia cuisine that I would have had for myself. So we would have gone through these before as well. All these are we covered for aquaculture species. Yeah. Right. So water quality for aquaponics. Right. So water quality for aquaponics. So aquatic animals are healthiest, right, and grow best when water quality parameters are within optimum ranges for that particular species. Water quality again determines ultimate success or failure of an aquaculture and aquaponics operation. The farmer must measure, record, and manage water quality throughout the production cycle to assure good growth and to avoid stress and death of the farm species. Water quality parameters affect respiration, feeding, metabolism, reproduction, and waste removal from the environment. So again, water quality is extremely important for production. So different types of testing equipment that we could utilize to test water quality. We have hack kits, right? Digital meters that we could put on in the water, pH pens, pH meters, digital handheld meters, testing strips, etc. So again, temperature. Remember when we did water quality parameter and recirculating systems, we would have seen how temperature and stuff affects bacteria, how most importantly how it affects the fish and the aquatic species. Well, temperature also affects all organisms in an aquaponic system, right? It has an effect on dissolved oxygen, and dissolved oxygen is a major requirement of both fish, plants, and bacteria. Yeah. Has an effect on toxicity of ammonia. All of this is recap from what we did before. So higher temperatures can restrict the absorption of calcium in plants. Yes, so this is something to be mindful of. Hydroponic growers, right? One of the major negatives people have towards hydroponics is that the plants do have a long shelf life. They say it is melt, it will stay up long, it is wilt after you pick it, all these different set of things. It's nothing to do with hydroponics, it's nothing to do with aquaponics. It all has to do with plant nutrition. And we stand the greatest, how could I put it, chance of not giving our plants all the right things that all the right nutrients they need when we in charge of putting these nutrients and stuff together. For example, with hydroponics, your plants will get any nutrition from the system, unlike soil. In soil, we supplement and we give fertilizers and slow release fertilizers, and because the soil to a certain extent does have nutrients and minerals and those things. In hydroponics, they have nothing. So you giving it everything. And if you mix the nutrient formulas incorrectly and you leave out certain macronutrients, which have critical roles to play in your plants, you will get problems later down the road. And what happens many times in hydroponics and things is that people don't use the right mix, the right ratios. And many instances they lack calcium or the right amount of calcium. And calcium is a requirement for the structural integrity of cell walls and different things like that in plants. So naturally, if it is a utilized a hydroponic fertilizer and you don't put enough calcium, the plant wouldn't have good structural integrity. They will be green, they will look real good when in the system, and as soon as they pick it, it will quote unquote melt. Because you come like taking calcium for your bones and you do have strong bones, yeah, and you do have a strong skeletal system. Kind of almost the same for plants. Now, with aquaponics, you're not really adding calcium per se, right? Because you're kind of generating it from the different processes within the system and different things like that. But if temperature goes up, it could restrict the absorption of calcium and it could end up in the same problem now of your plants not being able to stand once you pick it from the system, etc. Yeah. So higher temperatures could restrict the absorption of calcium in plants. Water quality in aquaponics, dissolve oxygen, essential for all three organisms, has the most immediate and drastic effect, primary limiting factor for stocking density of fish. Dissolves directly into the water surface. Optimum level for each organism is around 5 to 8 milligrams per liter. So in your aquaponic system, you want to maintain 5 to 8 milligrams per liter. Monitoring equipment expensive, right? The best to ensure air pumps and water pumps constantly circulating and aerating the water. Dissolve oxygen, affected by temperature, salinity, and elevation, right? So we spoke about all of these when we did water quality before, right? Fish becomes more active and increase their metabolism as temperature increases. You need more DO as temperature rises to grow muscle tissue, right? Minimum tolerable DO levels increase with a rise in temperature, right? So this table just showing you what the solubility of oxygen will be like based on temperature and altitude and salinity. All right, so we spoke about DO and stuff already before. Right, just a recap: signs of low DO, not eating and acting sluggish, gasping for air at the surface, group near the water inflow pipe, slow growth, outbreaks of disease and pests. Yeah, and remember we spoke about piping. When oxygen is so low, fishes come to the surface and basically try to see how much air they could gulp at the surface. And a sign of when tilapia dies from a lack of dissolved oxygen, something called piping, the mouth remains open. Right, and these are like aeration devices. pH has major impact, especially on plants and bacteria. Nitrifying bacteria experience difficulty below a pH of 6. So you don't want pH go too low in aquaponics because the nitrifying bacteria is crucial because it won't convert the ammonia and then you won't get nitrates for your plants. Okay. So pH affects the toxicity of ammonia to fish. Higher pH, the higher the toxicity. Controls plant access to micro and macronutrients. At a pH of 6 to 6.5, all nutrients readily available. At pH of 7.5, nutrient lockout can occur. Right, so nutrient lockout is where you do have the nutrients in solution, but they just cannot be used by the plants. Yeah. So pH is range from 0 to 14, pH of 7 neutral, right? So all these things we went through. Adjusting pH. So pH is adjusted by using an acid to lower it or a base to raise it, right? So again, just to recap on what we covered before, many acids and bases are extremely corrosive and dangerous, so care should be taken, right? So always take care when you're dealing with these types of chemicals or with aquaponics. Right, so again, we spoke about things like phosphoric acid for lowering pH, etc. A key point is to never use citric acid because this is antimicrobial and will destroy your biofilter. So you can monitor your pH using things like potassium hydroxide, calcium hydroxide. You could also add calcium carbonate in terms of eggshells, sea corals, seashells, corals. Yeah, so those things are composed of calcium carbonate. So when they decompose within the system, if your solution becomes very acidic and you have calcium carbonate substances, what happens? It will dissolve the calcium carbonate, and then the calcium carbonate it will dissociate, and the carbonates will react with the pH and bring it back up. The pH, it will raise the pH back up to the optimum. Yeah. So ammonia nitrate and nitrate. So ammonia nitrite toxic to fish, nitrate in high quantities, but we spoke about all this already. Monitoring ammonia test kits. You want the ammonia to be less than 0.02 ppm. A table here again showing us how pH and temperature affects ammonia. Higher the pH, the higher the temperature, the higher the percentage of toxic ammonia in the system. Nitrite and nitrate. So nitrite is more toxic to fish than nitrate. Nitrate relatively non-toxic, is the form in which plants could use for growth and development. So it's important to generate nitrates in the aquaponics. Then we have things like hydrogen sulfide. It's a poisonous gas produced by anaerobic decomposition of organics, toxic to fish and interferes with normal respiration. Toxicity is increased at higher temperatures. So with hydrogen sulfide, to avoid that, you want to remove your waste and stuff frequently from your filters. If you leave it for too long, it will break down, it will decompose, and you will get certain amounts of hydrogen sulfide being produced. Salinity again, this will be whether if you're using fresh water or salt water, etc. Right? So with salinity, you just have to make sure the salinity is at the correct values for the species you're culturing. But higher salinities are not too good for plants. So you want to keep it as fresh water like as possible. Carbon dioxide consumed during the day by photosynthesis, expired during the night by animals, plants, and bacteria. Yeah. Is added to water by respiration or diffusion, right? And when this happens, it forms a weak acid, which is carbonic acid. So you have to be mindful of that as well. Chlorine, again, harmful, toxic to fish, not so good for plants neither. So I just try to use dechlorinated water in my hydroponics and my aquaponics and stuff like that. But again, if you use chlorinated water in aquaponics, it also will involve going back or result in it going back to your fish. So what you want to do is have reserve tanks where you keep your water and you basically allow the chlorine to dissipate before you use it. Yeah. Toxins, be careful when you set up your systems. Don't want herbicides, pesticides, different things like that getting into your system. Yeah. So two important parameters to balance are pH and temperature, because how it directly affects things like ammonia, etc. When to do water quality tests, recommended to perform tests once per week. Ensure parameters are within optimal levels, very critical in new systems. Test for ammonia and nitrate if problems are noticed with fish or plants. Yeah. So I will conclude there for today. We have a little bit to go again. So next class we will wrap that up and we will begin the next topic. So that's basically that for today's lecture, right? So I will make these slides and stuff like that available to you all. So yeah, so that's that day. Any questions on what we covered today? Any questions? Right.